A billionaire with a criminal empire. The blizzard hit Serafina, Sarah Vargas, outside of Redwood, Montana, not as a gentle snowstorm, but as an act of nature's pure white violence. It was the kind of storm that didn't just obscure the road, it erased it. The headlights of her battered 10-year-old sedan, the Wanderer, only managed to illuminate a few swirling feet of the road before the light was swallowed whole by the relentless wind and snow. Sarah gripped the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles were white, her breath fogging the already frosty windshield. Her escape from Seattle had been necessary, a desperate last-minute flight from a career-ending betrayal that had left her reputation in tatters and her bank account nearly empty. She was meant to be on the interstate, heading toward a forgotten cousin in a quiet coastal town. Instead, she'd taken a reckless detour down an unpaved logging road, seeking a shortcut recommended by a dubious online map. Now she was completely and terrifyingly alone. "Come on, you old thing," she muttered to the car, her voice shaky. A gut-wrenching thud cut her off. It wasn't a deer, nor a patch of ice. It was too heavy, too solid. The car immediately sputtered, the engine cutting out with a sad terminal groan. The silence that followed was immense, broken only by the shriek of the wind and the rhythmic tick of cooling metal. She had hit something substantial, and now she was stranded, miles from anywhere in a rapidly developing whiteout. Panic clawed at her throat, but Sarah forced herself to breathe. She was a wounded heroine, yes, running from the public scandal of her business partner's embezzlement, but she wasn't helpless. She grabbed her phone. No signal. She checked the gas, 3/4 full, but useless now. She reached for the door handle, ignoring the primal fear screaming at her to stay put. Whatever she'd hit could be dangerous, but the temperature was dropping faster than she could think, and staying in the dead car would be a death sentence. The door opened with a groan, and a blast of icy air stole her breath. She fumbled for the flashlight and stepped out, sinking ankle-deep into the snow. The light beams struggled through the storm, illuminating a terrifying sight. Not a tree stump, but a sleek, matte black luxury SUV, a vehicle that looked impossibly expensive and utterly out of place on this deserted back road. It was half hidden by a snowdrift, its driver's side severely impacted, as if it had hit something even harder than her little sedan. Sarah approached cautiously, her heart hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs. The driver's door was ajar, and a heavy, muscular hand was gripping the frame, knuckles skinned and white. "Hello?" Sarah called out, her voice thin against the wind. She shone the light inside. Slumped against the steering wheel was the most powerful, intensely beautiful man she had ever seen. He was broad-shouldered, impeccably dressed in clothes that looked like custom Italian tailoring, now torn and stained with blood. And his dark hair was slicked back, falling forward over a sharp, angular jaw. He wasn't unconscious. He was fiercely awake. His head snapped up at the intrusion. His eyes, a shade of glacial, startling gold, fixed instantly on her. There was no fear in them, only a raw, almost bestial intensity that sent a violent shiver down Sarah's spine. It was a look of dangerous, restrained power, and it instantly signaled that this man was the alpha male shifter archetype she'd only read about in urban fantasy novels. Except this was terrifyingly real. "Get back to your car," he commanded, his voice a low, gravelly rumble that was both commanding and laced with a barely concealed pain. It held a dangerous edge, a warning she felt deep in her bones. I can't. My car won't start," Sarah stammered, holding the light steady. She noticed the wound then, a nasty, deep laceration across his lower abdomen, bleeding profusely into the fine wool of his jacket. He pushed himself up, wincing visibly, the movement radiating sheer effort. No, no one calls anyone. No sirens, no people. He tried to stand fully, stumbling slightly, and she caught a dizzying whiff of something metallic and earthy, like wet fur and old copper. The wind howled a new chorus, and a deep, resonant baying echoed from the trees bordering the road, a sound that wasn't a dog, but something infinitely larger, more predatory. The sound made the man's golden eyes narrow to slits. His body tensed, radiating an energy so charged it felt like electricity in the air. "They're close," he growled, not to her, but to himself. He grabbed her arm, his grip was painfully strong, and his gaze was suddenly laser-focused, penetrating. "You are going to help me. You will get me away from here right now, or you will regret it." The threat was clear, but the pain in his eyes was clearer. Against her better judgment, the nurse in her, the one who had once volunteered at a trauma center, took over. A dramatic event or dangerous encounter introduces the male shifter and the heroine. This was the hook, the moment her life irrevocably shifted into the supernatural. She was tethered to a powerful, wounded man, a man who was clearly hiding more than just a busted radiator. His scent, his eyes, the sound in the woods, it all screamed the magical rules of a world she didn't know existed. "Fine," she whispered, pulling free and pointing toward her stalled sedan, which now felt like the only anchor in this swirling vortex of danger. "Get in my car. We need to get out of the open." She didn't know who or what was close, but if he was afraid, she should be terrified. He followed her, his steps heavy, stumbling once on a patch of ice. As he slid into the passenger seat, his golden eyes met hers in the faint glow of the dash lights. Fated mate, destiny themes whispered in the sudden, shocking familiarity of his gaze, a fleeting moment of connection that transcended the chaos. "The name is Alistair," he said, his breath ragged. "You saved me, human. Don't expect a thank you. Just drive." Sarah stared at her dead ignition, her face pale. "I can't. We hit something. The engine is dead." Alistair looked at her, then back into the woods, the baying sound closer now, and a muscle jumped in his jaw. The deep cut on his abdomen was bleeding faster. His eyes flashed with a feral light. "The engine is not dead," he stated, reaching out a hand that was impossibly large, impossibly warm, and placed it over the ignition column. He didn't turn the key. He just held it, closing his eyes briefly. Then there was a low hum, a sharp crackle of static, and a sound like deeply vibrating metal. The Wanderer's engine coughed, sputtered, and roared back to life, the dashboard lights flickering wildly before settling down. Sarah gasped, clutching her chest. This was beyond mechanical failure or repair. This was impossible. The unlikely meeting had just become a terrifying introduction to a secret world. "Drive," Alistair said again, leaning back against the headrest, closing his golden eyes. "Just drive north. Don't look back." Sarah didn't need to be told twice. She slammed the car into drive, peeling out onto the obscured logging road, the sound of the engine covering the distant hungry baying. She didn't know who Alistair was or what was chasing him, but one thing was certain. Her run from her past had just crashed headfirst into his, and the man bleeding out next to her was not a man. Sarah drove. She drove until the early hours of the morning, the old sedan miraculously purring through the unrelenting blizzard. The hum of the engine was a fragile shield against the terrifying events of the night, but it couldn't drown out the questions swirling in her mind. How had he started her car? What was that sound in the woods? And who was Alistair?
He hadn't spoken another word since commanding her to drive. He leaned against the headrest, his breathing shallow but steady. The scent of him, metallic blood and something wild, deeply primal, filled the small cabin of the car, an intoxicating and unnerving presence. Every now and then, his golden eyes would flicker open, locking onto her in the rearview mirror, sending a jolt of both fear and an inexplicable magnetism through her. Then, just as quickly, they would close again. She tried to rationalize it. Adrenaline, a trick of the light, a faulty memory, but the cold dread in her stomach, the undeniable power she'd felt emanating from him, refused to be dismissed. This was not normal, and her deeply ingrained sense of self-preservation screamed at her to leave him at the first sign of civilization. But the road remained deserted, and the snow showed no signs of letting up. As the dawn approached, painting the sky in bruised purples and grays, the blizzard began to relent, softening to a heavy snowfall. The landscape transformed into a hushed, pristine wilderness, towering pines laden with snow, their branches bowing under the weight. Sarah risked a glance at Alistair. His face was pale, a sheen of sweat on his brow, but his jaw was still tight, sculpted by pain and an iron will. He was clearly trying to hide the extent of his injury, but I could see the slow, steady stains spreading on his tailored jacket. He needed help, real help. "We need to stop," I said, my voice raspy from this use. "You're bleeding heavily." His eyes snapped open, blazing gold, instantly alert. "No, not yet." "Alistair, look at you. You're going into shock. I'm not a doctor, but I've seen enough blood to know you're in serious trouble." Her concern, despite her fear, was genuine. Her past, filled with the raw realities of a city trauma center before she moved into corporate event planning, resurfaced with an urgent clarity. He grunted, a sound of reluctant concession. "A few more miles. There's a cabin, not far." "A cabin? Whose cabin?" "Mine," he replied, his voice strained, isolated. "Safe." Sarah bit back a sarcastic remark. Safe from what? Her mind replayed the chilling baying sound. Safe from them. Suspicion and curiosity warred within her. This man was dangerous, mysterious, and utterly compelling. They drove for another grueling hour. The logging road, now less treacherous, snaked deeper into the national forest. Just as Sarah thought her nerves would fray completely, a break in the trees revealed it. A sprawling, rustic yet luxurious log cabin, nestled by a frozen lake, smoke curling lazily from its stone chimney. It was breathtakingly beautiful, an image torn from a wilderness retreat magazine. It was also completely devoid of any other human presence. "Pull up to the side entrance," Alistair directed, his voice gaining a fraction of its former strength. I did as he was told. The moment the car stopped, Alistair pushed open his door, staggering out with a grimace. He moved with a predatory grace that belayed his injury. Every movement coiled with power. He pulled a heavy ring of keys from his pocket, and with a silent signal, gestured for me to follow him to a side door. Inside, the cabin was a masterpiece of masculine elegance. Soaring ceilings, a massive stone fireplace, plush leather furniture, and floor-to-ceiling windows looking out onto the snow-covered lake. It was the kind of place a billionaire would own. A billionaire with secrets. "Bathroom, first door on the left," he rasped, swaying slightly. "Find a first aid kit. Large one. Under the sink." I hesitated, my instincts screaming at me. But the sight of him, now truly struggling, overruled my fear. I found the bathroom, luxurious, of course, and located a robust medical kit. When I returned, Alistair had shed his ruined jacket and shirt, tossing them carelessly onto a pristine rug. I breath-hitched. His torso was a canvas of honed muscle, powerful and lean. The wound was worse than I thought, a ragged gash that looked too deep, too vicious for a simple car crash. Around the wound, the skin was oddly discolored, a faint bruising that seemed to radiate outward in strange patterns. And beneath the visible injury, there was something else, something I couldn't quite place. A faint, almost imperceptible scar, or perhaps a birthmark, tracing lines of an ancient symbol over his left ribcage. "Don't just stare, human. I'm bleeding," he growled, his golden eyes burning into hers. Sarah snapped out of her trance. Okay. This is a deep cut. You need stitches. This isn't something I can just patch up with bandages." "You will do what you can," he said, collapsing onto the leather sofa, his head falling back. He was losing strength rapidly. With trembling hands, I began to clean the wound. The scent of the blood, thick and animalistic, filled my nostrils. I worked efficiently, sterilizing, applying pressure, trying to stem the flow. The cut was long, jagged, and it looked as though something had torn at him. Not a shard of metal from a car crash, but teeth? My mind recoiled from the thought. As I cleaned, I noticed his rapid, shallow breathing, the clenching of his jaw. He was enduring the pain with an unnerving stoicism. I was close, my hands brushing against his warm skin, and an electric current seemed to pass between us. His golden eyes, though clouded with pain, watched me every move. "What happened, Alistair?" I finally dared to ask, my voice barely a whisper. "This isn't from a car accident." He let out a sharp, humorless laugh. "You're more perceptive than you look, Sarah Vargas." He knew my name. Of course he did. He probably knew everything about me. Another chilling thought. Let's just say some business associates had a disagreement. "Business associates with claws?" I countered, a spark of defiance flashing in her eyes. He didn't reply, just watched me. A silent intensity that spoke volumes. The air between us thickened, charged with unspoken truths and dangerous secrets. This wasn't just a physical wound. It was a window into a hidden, brutal world. The slow-burn romance had begun, not with gentle touches, but with the stark, visceral reality of blood and shared peril. She finished dressing the wound as best she could, applying a thick layer of antiseptic ointment and bandaging it tightly. He still needed more. He needed proper medical attention, but the way he'd reacted to the mention of people and sirens suggested that was out of the question. "You need rest," I said, her voice softer now, her earlier terror slowly being replaced by a strange, protective instinct. I didn't trust him, not entirely, but I couldn't leave a wounded man alone in a blizzard. This was the start of building trust, forged in a desperate, isolated situation. Alistair looked at me, his golden eyes losing some of their sharp edge, replaced by a flicker of something I couldn't quite decipher. Gratitude, perhaps, or a deeper, more primal acknowledgement. "Thank you," he murmured, the words rough, as if unused. It was the first genuine expression I'd heard from him. "There are clothes in the guest room, food in the kitchen. Make yourself comfortable. I'll handle things." He stood up slowly, carefully, his muscles protesting. He picked up his ruined clothes, a flicker of something dark crossing his face as he looked at the bloodstains. Then he walked to a door at the far end of the living room and disappeared inside. Sarah stood alone in the vast, silent cabin, the scent of antiseptic mixing with the lingering wildness of Alistair. Her car was miraculously running, but she hadn't dared to try to leave. She was drawn to him, to the mystery, to the inexplicable feeling that her life, already derailed, had now been irrevocably bound to his. Atmospheric. She crept closer to his door, her ear pressed against the polished wood. The growling intensified, a pained, strained sound. Then a crash from within, followed by a series of heavy thuds, as if furniture were being violently thrown around. Fear warred with concern. He was injured, severely. Could he be in pain? Or was this something else entirely? The rational part of her brain screamed to run, to start the car and drive away from this impossible situation. But another, softer part remembered the raw pain in his golden eyes, the involuntary groan that had escaped his lips when she'd cleaned his wound. Taking a deep breath, she knocked. "Alistair? Are you all right? I heard a noise." The growling stopped abruptly. A heavy silence descended, broken only by her own ragged breath. Then a low, strained voice. "Stay out. Do not come in." His command was absolute, but the pain lacing it was undeniable. Sarah hesitated for a moment longer, then made a decision that would forever alter her path. She couldn't leave him. Not yet. Not when he was clearly in distress. "Alistair, I'm coming in," she announced, pushing the door open slowly, cautiously. The room was in chaos. A large, sturdy oak dresser was overturned, its contents strewn across the floor. The bed was ripped apart, sheets shredded, mattress dislodged. And Alistair was standing in the center of the destruction, his back to her, hunched over, his shoulders shaking. He was still in his ruined trousers, but his powerful back was bare, glistening with sweat. His muscles were corded and flexing and relaxing with an unnerving intensity. As he slowly turned, Sarah gasped, her eyes widening in terror and awe. His face was contorted, jaw clenched. His eyes, though still golden, were now burning with an unholy light, the pupils elongated, feral. Dark, coarse fur was beginning to sprout along his shoulders and chest, a creeping shadow against his skin. His nails had lengthened, sharpening into claws. He was caught in a horrifying, agonizing partial transformation. The secret unveiled was beginning, not in a calm confession, but in a raw, primal display of immense, uncontrolled power. "I told you to stay out," he snarled, his voice a distorted, deeper rumble, barely human. He looked like a creature torn between two worlds, his humanity clinging by a thread. What is happening to you?" Sarah whispered, gripping the poker tighter, though she knew it wouldn't be useful against whatever he was becoming. "The wound," he gasped, clutching his side, the bandages now stained dark with fresh blood. "It's interfering with the shift. It's tearing me apart." He stumbled, falling to one knee. The full moon was visible through the large window, a luminous orb in the deepening twilight. Its light seemed to intensify the changes, making the fur thicker, the growl deeper. He was fighting it, fighting an internal battle for control. Sarah dropped the poker, her fear momentarily eclipsed by an overwhelming wave of empathy. He wasn't trying to hurt her. He was in agony. This was the deeper meaning behind his reclusive nature, the secret he was protecting. This was his burden, his curse. "What can I do?" she asked, taking a tentative step forward. "Tell me, how can I help?" His head snapped up, those golden, feral eyes fixing on her, a mixture of surprise and desperation in their depths. Building trust was taking a terrifying, supernatural turn. This was an intimate moment, not of seduction, but of raw vulnerability and life-or-death reliance. The ancient books," he rasped, pointing a clawed hand toward a hidden bookshelf behind a sliding panel. On the bottom shelf, marked with a crescent moon. "Find the ritual for purification, the blood fever. It must be stopped." Sarah didn't question it. She didn't understand, but she moved. She found the hidden panel, her fingers tracing ancient carvings on the wood. Inside, a collection of leather-bound tomes glowed faintly in the dim light. She quickly located the one with the crescent moon embossed on its cover. As she opened it, the pages rustled, thick and heavy, filled with arcane symbols and intricate illustrations. Her eyes scanned the text, her mind struggling to comprehend. It spoke of lunar cycles, of bloodlines, of a fever of the wolf caused by tainted wounds or emotional turmoil threatening to consume the human form forever. This was the magical rules of his world laid bare. She found the passage. To quell the fever of the tainted blood, one must apply the wolfsbane poultice, prepared under the full moon's gaze, and administered by the touch of a willing human. The spirit bond, once formed, can calm the beast. Sarah's gaze darted to the window, where the full moon hung low and majestic. Then to Alistair, still writhing on the floor, his transformation growing more pronounced. The willing human. That was her. The spirit bond? What did that even mean? Wolfsbane, she muttered, trying to remember where she'd seen it. There was a small dried bundle of herbs hanging near the kitchen fireplace, forgotten until now. She remembered seeing it earlier, dismissing it as decorative. "In the kitchen," she called out to Alistair, who was now fully on his hands and knees, emitting a low, pained whine. He gave a guttural growl that sounded like an affirmation, his body racked with tremors. Sarah raced to the kitchen, her mind a blur of fear and determination. She grabbed the wolfsbane, crushing it with a mortar and pestle she found, mixing it with a little water and a clear, viscous liquid she found labeled moon petal nectar, another impossible ingredient that confirmed the supernatural reality of her situation. She returned to the bedroom, her heart pounding. Alistair was now a terrifying sight. His facial features were elongating, his teeth sharper, his hands becoming paws. He was almost fully wolf, held in agonizing limbo by the wound, and perhaps the remnants of his human will. "Alistair," she said, her voice steady despite the trembling in her hands, "I have it." He looked up, his golden eyes wide with a desperate plea. He was losing himself. Sarah knelt beside him, placing the cool, green poultice against the bleeding gash. The moment her fingers brushed his skin, a searing heat shot up her arm, straight to her heart. It wasn't painful, but intensely electric, a jolt of energy that connected them on a level far beyond the physical. It was as if her very being was now intertwined with his. The fated mate, destiny themes, were no longer whispers, but a roar in her soul. Alistair cried out, a sound that was half human, half wolf, and then slowly, agonizingly, his body began to relax. The fur receded, his features softening, the claws retracting. The golden light in his eyes dimmed, and a deep exhaustion settled over him. He was still Alistair, but different. His skin felt softer, his muscles less rigid. The connection, however, remained, a warm, thrumming beneath her touch. He leaned into her, his head resting against her shoulder, his ragged breath warm on her neck. "Sarah," he whispered, his voice returning to its normal timbre, albeit hoarse with fatigue. You saved me. You truly saved me." He was fully human again, but irrevocably changed in her eyes, and she, in turn, was forever altered by his secret, by the bond that had just been forged in the heart of the storm. The mystery hadn't vanished, it had simply deepened, becoming more personal, more dangerous.
Alistair pushed the snowmobile out of the garage and onto the vast, frozen lake. They skimmed across the surface, twin plumes of snow spraying behind them, heading toward the dark line of trees on the far shore. Behind them, a low, savage howl ripped through the air, chilling Sarah to the bone. She risked a glance back. Silhouetted against the cabin, emerging from the surrounding woods, were two immense, dark shapes. Not wolves, but hulking, 7-foot-tall beasts. Half man, half wolf, their shoulders massive, their eyes gleaming like malevolent coals. "Iron Fangs," Alistair said, his voice low and tight over the roar of the engine.
They're faster on this terrain than I am in my current state. Hold on. He throttled the engine, the snowmobile leaping forward. The ground sped past in a blur of white, and the cold wind sliced at Sarah's face. She pressed herself against Alistair's broad back, inhaling the earthy scent of pine, machine oil, and his unique, primal scent, a mix that now felt like home. Focus, Sarah. His thoughts seemed to pierce her own panic, clear and sharp in her mind, though he hadn't spoken aloud. We need to lose them in the pines. He was communicating through the bond. The realization was stunning, the ultimate confirmation of the magical rules now governing her life. They reached the tree line, plunging into the dense forest. Alistair drove with a reckless precision, maneuvering the machine through narrow gaps between the trees, forcing the larger, pursuing Iron Fangs to slow down. Suddenly, a massive, dark figure burst out from behind a stand of pines directly ahead, attempting to cut them off. It leaped, landing with a ground-shaking thud right in their path. "Brace yourself," Alistair yelled. He swerved violently, barely avoiding the beast. The snowmobile clipped a tree, throwing the machine and the riders into a chaotic skid. They crashed into a snowdrift, the engine dying with a loud metallic screech. Sarah was stunned, snow packed around her head. But Alistair was instantly on his feet, drawing the gun he'd holstered. The huge Iron Fang was regaining its footing, its muzzle snarling, revealing teeth the size of daggers. "Stay behind me, Sarah," Alistair roared, his voice thick with the alpha command. He fired 2 rapid shots. The bullets hit the massive creature in the chest, but the effect was minimal, only momentarily slowing it down. The Iron Fang lunged. Alistair threw the useless gun aside, knowing conventional weapons wouldn't work against a fully shifted alpha. He met the attack head-on, engaging the much heavier, fully shifted beast in a desperate hand-to-hand fight. He was wounded, and only in his human form, but he moved with the speed and precision of a trained warrior. As they wrestled in the snow, a brutal tableau of snapping bone and tearing muscle, Alistair cried out, not in pain, but in rage. And Sarah felt the powerful surge of his fury course through their bond, a blinding, intoxicating rush that momentarily eclipsed her fear. The dangerous obstacles were upon them. She knew she couldn't just watch. Alistair was injured, fighting an impossible battle against 2 fully shifted wolves who now emerged from the trees. She spotted the backpack she'd dropped, remembering the small flask of moon petal nectar she'd packed instinctively. Driven by the pure surge of the shared bond, the need to protect him, Sarah scrambled through the snow, snatched the flask, and uncorked it with shaking hands. She knew what this liquid was meant to do: purify, stabilize, and anchor the human form. If she could get it into his system, maybe it would give him the strength he needed, or at least stabilize his wounds enough to fight back. Just as the second Iron Fang lunged for Alistair's exposed throat, Sarah rushed forward and hurled the flask, shattering the glass against the beast's dark, furry side. The moon petal nectar splashed onto the alpha's wound, followed by the broken shards of glass. Alistair let out a shout as the liquid made contact, but the Iron Fang recoiled with an agonizing high-pitched screech, stumbling back. The magical compound was noxious to the black magic twisting its own power. It bought them a crucial few seconds. Alistair capitalized instantly, delivering a vicious, calculating kick to the wounded wolf's ribs, sending it crashing into a tree. "The snowmobile! Now!" Alistair commanded, dragging Sarah toward the still-smoking vehicle. He didn't need to try to restart it. He simply gripped the handlebars, his eyes focusing with intense concentration, and the engine roared back to life, fueled by the last reserves of his raw shifter power. He pulled her onto the back, their bodies pressed together in desperate proximity, his strength fading, but his resolve absolute. They escaped, leaving the 2 howling Iron Fangs behind, momentarily stalled by the moon petal's debilitating effects. As they stepped deeper into the silent heart of the Montana wilderness, Sarah clung to Alistair, the phantom sensation of their bond thrumming fiercely, a constant reminder that her life was no longer her own. She was bound to a werewolf, on the run from a magical pack war, and somehow she had never felt more purposeful or more alive. She had lost her human world, but she had found her place, right here, next to the man who was both a billionaire and a beast, the last protector of a hidden world. She had to learn how to fight, and quickly, because the fate of two worlds now rested on the fragile, newly formed bond between a cynical human and a burdened alpha.
He closed the final distance between them, capturing her mouth in a kiss that was desperate, fierce, and entirely necessary. It was not gentle. It was a hungry, possessive affirmation of the bond, a taste of the pure, primal need the wolf felt for its anchor. The kiss was the emotional breakthrough, a silent, visceral confession that shattered his last pretense of cold rejection. The sheer power of the intimacy surged through the bond, washing away the emotional pain and replacing it with dizzying, stabilizing euphoria. The latent fear and trauma in both of them receded under the undeniable force of their connection. He broke the kiss, his eyes now glowing a faint, molten gold, gazing fiercely into hers. "We move north, but understand this, human. You are now mine, and the Iron Fangs will pay in blood for every mile they make us run." Sarah didn't need words. She simply nodded, a fierce determination settling in her heart. She was no longer running from a life of betrayal. She was running toward a destiny of fire and fang. The kiss was the turning point, not an ending. It marked the moment Alistair finally surrendered to the impossible reality of the bond, choosing to embrace their shared fate rather than fight it. The immediate aftermath was a flurry of grim, necessary action fueled by the revitalized energy of their connection. They abandoned the snowmobiles a few miles further on, burying them under a deep drift to hide their trail. Alistair, now stabilized by Sarah's anchoring presence, led them on foot. He moved with the quiet stealth of a predator, navigating the dense forest with an innate knowledge of the land, teaching Sarah to walk lightly, to read the snow, and to recognize the signs of pursuit. Their journey became a study in contrasts. Long hours of freezing, exhausting trekking, punctuated by moments of intense, vulnerable connection. The bond, now accepted and acknowledged, was a constant, shimmering wire between them. The slow-burned romance had combusted into a searing, immediate intimacy. They didn't need constant conversation. Their emotions flowed through the bond, unfiltered and honest. Sarah knew when Alistair's wound pulsed with pain, and he knew when her fear spiked, instantly moderating her terror with his steady, protective resolve. One night, huddled together for warmth in a makeshift shelter of pine branches and snow, the air was thick with unspoken truths. Alistair was tending the fire, his expression brooding, the flickering light catching the golden flakes in his amber eyes. "When I tried to send you away," he began, his voice low. It felt like being torn in half. She moved closer, resting her head against his shoulder. "I felt it. That's how I knew you were lying. You can build walls in your mind, Alistair, but the bond bypasses them. It deals only in truth." He leaned his head against hers, a rare, profound gesture of weariness and reliance. "The truth is terrifying, Sarah. I am used to solitude, used to leading through force and fear. The wolf, he accepts the anchor, craves the stability you give. But the man is afraid of needing anything this much." "And what does the man feel?" she prompted, softly, pushing him toward the love-revealed moment. He shifted, turning to face her fully, his hand reaching up to cradle her jaw. "The man sees you. He sees the courage you showed, not just in facing the Iron Fangs, but in walking away from your entire life. He sees your wound, your betrayal, and he wants to protect it. He wants to heal it. My world is dark, Sarah. It is complicated, brutal, and lethal. But when you are near, when I feel your presence through the bond,
It's the only time I feel truly whole. The anchor doesn't just stabilize the wolf, it stabilizes me. His confession was not a declaration of flowery love, but a raw, deeply profound statement of absolute necessity and commitment. I love you, Sarah Vargas, not in the way a human loves, but in the way a shifter commits, body, soul, and destiny. You are my mate. The connection, it's a mark of the goddess, a true soul bond. It is eternal. Sarah's breath caught. The bond pulsed violently, not in pain but in sheer, dizzying affirmation. The knowledge was instantaneous, flowing from him to her, settling deep in her heart. She didn't just hear it, she felt the truth of it, the ancient, powerful conviction of the wolf. I don't know that word, mate, but I know this. I have been running my entire life, and now I've stopped. I won't let you face this alone. I am bound to you, Alistair, and I love you too, completely. Their commitment was sealed with a deeper, quieter kiss, not the frantic urgency of the escape, but a solemn shared acceptance of their shared, impossible fate. They were no longer two wounded individuals, they were a unit, a single entity focused on survival. This commitment led immediately to practical preparation for the final challenge. We're close to the safe zone now, Alistair said, drawing back, his eyes sharp with renewed focus. But the Iron Things know this territory. They will set a trap. I need to get you into the zone, but I must face their leader alone. That's the only way to break this spell and regain control of the Volkov territory. Absolutely not, Sarah immediately countered, her voice firm. You shift, even if you manage to control the feral aspect, the poison will severely hamper your fighting strength. You need a controlled environment, not a duel. It's a tradition, an alpha challenge. It's how we end conflicts and claim authority. Vorlag is a brute, relying on dark magic and sheer size. I will fight him in my human form until the moment I can safely shift and take the kill. Sarah shook her head, the courage of the human anchor facing down the recklessness of the alpha. If you fight him alone, you die. Or you go feral, and the chaos you fear begins anyway. We are bonded, Alistair. Your strength is now tethered to mine. That means we fight together. She recalled the ancient book's passage about the soul bond, about the anchor stabilizing the beast. You said the bond stabilizes you. Let's use it. We don't need a full shift. You need to control the partial shift to access the speed, the strength, and the senses without succumbing to the fever. I can anchor you through the fight. Alistair stared at her, the idea reckless, unprecedented, and utterly brilliant. The wolf within stirred, fascinated by the concept of controlled, anchored power. No alpha has ever fought in a partial anchored shift, he murmured, the risk immense. Then be the first, Sarah urged, her love giving her impossible confidence. If this bond is truly destiny, then let's make it our weapon. Alistair finally conceded, a slow, predatory smile stretching his lips. The fear was replaced by cold, calculating anticipation. Very well, mate. We will use the bond. But before we face Vorlog, you need to learn to defend yourself, and I need to teach you how to read the wolf when he's unleashed. He pulled her closer, his eyes intense, with a potent mix of love and lethal intent. Love revealed was now synonymous with survival. We commit now. Everything. In this world, we fight as one. Anchored firmly to the Alpha, who was now her entire, terrifying, exhilarating world.